Who's ready to get this party started this morning? I know I am. All right, so good morning, everybody, and welcome to our fourth serving of Coffee with Coaches. I'm Natalie Winklefuss, and I have the honor of serving Oberlin College as its athletics director. And despite the coronavirus being a formidable opponent, we are growing forward. So we may be grieving the loss of our game days, but we are relying on creativity and Zoom as we look for safe ways to replicate the joy and growth that comes with competition surrounded by supportive teammates, colleagues, and alumni. Our athletics department continues to come together in the spirit of collaboration and shared responsibility to make educational moments happen for our student athletes, our staff, and campus community. Just as we are building leadership skills daily on our fields, pools, courts, and Zoom rooms, we have become equally invested in helping build the skills necessary to transform our athletics community to a place where people are seen, heard, valued, cared for, and respected for their full selves. We are engaged in discussions and taking action to create the kind of substantive change we hope and know will achieve equality and inclusion and help us become a more just athletics department. In short, we are listening and we are learning out loud. And now I'd like to introduce our head barista for today's discussion. She's got lots of titles. She's our head volleyball coach. She is our senior woman administrator. She is our deputy Title IX and equity coordinator for athletics. She's also an assistant athletics director. She loves unicorns and live music, and she's developed some crazy culinary skills during this pandemic. Wonderful people of our Oberlin College community. She is Erica Rapp.
Thank you, Natalie. Welcome, everyone. I'm really excited to be here to talk about women in leadership, sports leadership today. I think when Craig first asked me, I was like, I don't know, Craig, I don't want to do that. Then I said, Craig, what's the topic? And he told me women in sports leadership, which is something that's really important to me. I'm really passionate about if you know me. So I'm really excited to talk with our amazing panel today, especially with it being Women's History Month. And it was just International Women's Day on Monday. So a big part of this month is just celebrating amazing women that have inspired us. A couple ground rules. Let's all make sure to mute ourselves, but if you have a question, you can raise your hand. We'll go with the physical raise your hand. And then, or type it in the chat and we will hopefully get to them all. Yeah, let's take it away. Panelists, do we want to start with some brief intros and then kind of tell us what you've been doing since Oberlin and what your current role is? Who wants to start? Lila?
Sure. Thanks, Erica. Hi, everyone. My name is Lila Drafts Johnson. I use she, her, hers, and I graduated in 2018. I majored in Latin American studies and politics, and I ran track and field. Currently, I work at the league office at Major League Baseball, and I work in player programs, which is basically player education. And largely what I do is manage the league-wide domestic violence, sexual assault, and child abuse policy. So I help provide prevention and educational workshops to our players and staff on those topics. With COVID-19, I have started wearing a new hat. So my department typically does anything educational for players. So I've kind of gone from talking about healthy relationships and consent to talking about health and safety protocols for COVID. So I'm pretty eager to get back to my usual topics that I'm discussing, but also learning a lot in this new role. Before this, I spent the first year after college working at Amherst College and working as an assistant coach for track and field, which was another really awesome part of the sports industry to experience. And I'm excited to be here. I'll pass off to Michaela.
Yeah, thanks. So my name is Michaela. I use she, her, and hers. I graduated from Oberlin in 2017. I had a double major in comparative literature and Hispanic studies. I was a 4-year member of the varsity women's lacrosse team. And currently I work for Major League Baseball in the data operations department. So I do a lot with our real-time data feed called BOSS, and which that basically tracks real-time data. It stands for balls, outs, strikes, and I forget what the second one is. Streaming, I think. So yeah, basically it runs a lot of our data and also drives our player tracking and MLB betting. So yeah, it's been really fun. Before this, I was working part-time for Major League Baseball. I was going to Indians games and operating our full-time coordinating clock, which basically it tracks and it tracks like in between inning pitches, in between batters, things like that. And so yeah, I do a lot with just data operations as a whole. So I can pass it off to Zoe if she's ready.
Hi, everyone. I'm Zoe. I am a third year at Oberlin. Well, I'm expected to graduate in 2023 now. I'm currently on a gap year. So I'm living in New York at home. At Oberlin, I'm on the women's volleyball team. I write for the school newspaper as a senior staff sports writer. I am on the student athletic advisory committee, so I help put together community events, and I am studying to work at the Peer Support Center. Before the pandemic, I was also volunteering for the YWCA, who actually partnered with the local Oberlin schools to create a support system for some BIPOC students at Oberlin who felt like they needed some extra support at the middle school and high school. And yeah, I'm really excited to be here and to talk about this. And I'll pass it to Bonnie.
I am Bonnie Desimone Ford, graduated in 1979 with a degree in what was then called government, and I think is now called politics. I have been a working journalist for my entire career with very little grounding at Oberlin in the profession itself, other than being sports director of WOBC. So those who work there know that it can lead to big things. I spent the majority of my career in newspapers, including most recently the Chicago Tribune. And the early part of my career, I spent covering regular news, meaning local government, crime and courts, education, general feature work. But my first love was always sports, and I returned to that in my mid-30s and had my own freelance business for a while following newspapers, and eventually made the switch to digital. In 2005, began working for ESPN part-time and eventually full-time for the last 13 years. My last contract recently expired there, and I made the decision to go out on my own again and pursue some independent projects. So unlike most of these other panelists, I was not much of an athlete. I played 1 year of basketball and a season of ultimate Frisbee, but I just was always fascinated with the culture of athletics at Oberlin, and ultimately that was the spark that led to a lifelong passion.
Wow, thank you all for those intros. Just on a personal note, Lila, I'm thinking about when you were my Branch Rickey mentee, and you were kind of like, I don't really know, but I want to get to know all these areas of athletics, and it's really cool to see you pursuing that and in a role that I think you're really probably thriving in as well. So
Thanks, Erica. You did a really good job.
yeah. All right, well, let's jump into our first question. So this is probably more for Michaela, Lila, and Bonnie, and then Zoe will get to you after that. But who inspired you to pursue a career in sports? Michaela, maybe we can start with you. I know your father was a sports agent representing players in the NFL. Is that kind of where you started getting interested, or was there something else that happened?
Yeah, so I guess I would say it was a mixture of a bunch of different things. My dad being a sports agent was always a really cool thing. But I also grew up with two older brothers who played multiple sports, and my mom would always joke that I was sort of like the backseat child because my childhood was spent taking my brothers to all their football, baseball, basketball, lacrosse games and practices. So I was definitely raised in a very sports-oriented environment, which ultimately led me to become involved in sports myself. playing tennis from a young age, and then lacrosse in middle school, high school, and then college. So I guess, yeah, just watching my brothers play sports and my dad as a sports agent, and through my own experiences, I know how greatly sports can impact people's lives, and it's such a fun environment. So when I was presented with the opportunity at Major League Baseball, it felt like a perfect fit and like a dream come true. So yeah.
That's amazing. I think sometimes people don't realize how much sports impact their lives until later on.
Yeah, absolutely.
Lila, you want to go next?
Sure. Yeah. I think when I think kind of like Michaela, a lot of my own experiences in sport obviously played into it. I remember when I was graduating from Oberlin and kind of figuring out next steps, the guiding compass for me was just, what is it that's like really setting my world on fire? What am I passionate about? And the answer was so obviously sports. And it didn't really help that like my last track meet was the day before I graduated. So it definitely was front of mind all the way through. But I remember at a track and field banquet, and Coach Appenheimer, I know you're here, but our head coach said, I love my job. I love what I do every single day. And I remember thinking to myself, like, that's what I want to be able to say when I'm in the workforce. And that's what I heard from a lot of my coaches was it can be a pretty difficult profession, but they did really love what they do. And that was a lot of what kind of moved me into coaching immediately after college. And I think, also having a lot of female mentors, from Erica and Natalie in the athletics department to Izzy Alexander and Alicia Samuel as coaches on my team for all 4 years, which is pretty unusual in the track and field collegiate world. Just kind of showed me like, oh yeah, I could do this too. So I was looking for a way to synthesize that love of sport with some of the other sort of social justice issues I was interested in. And like Michaela, when this opportunity came up, it was a no-brainer.
Bonnie, do you want to finish us off here?
Sure. I think sports started out for me as something that I could share with my dad, even as a young girl. He took me to my first baseball game on my 10th birthday at Yankee Stadium. Sorry for all the Yankee haters out there. And I was enthralled. It was just like all the stories you read. He held my hand. I walked up the ramp. I saw the green and I was in love immediately. Beyond that, the time when I grew up was a time of really exponential growth in sports in general. In women's sport, it was more individual sport. Olympic athletes and also tennis was hugely important to me. Watching players like Chris Evert and Martina Navratilova and Yvonne Goolagong, who it gives me goosebumps to say I later got to meet and interview and work alongside. Really a kind of a crazy path that way. But even, college sports were exploding. The NBA was going through some really interesting times, as was the NFL. And sports fascinated me as another way to look at the human condition, basically, and how people interacted and what worked and what didn't. Because certainly, as the people on this panel know, you can have a group of great athletes, but if there isn't that chemistry between them, it's not necessarily going to be a winning combination. So that is what has always driven me, is to understand how people function under pressure, who performs well, why, and why people do or don't dovetail with each other in that pressure crucible when it counts. So I've found it, I've never been bored, put it that way. And I'm really, really glad that I followed my heart back into it in my mid-30s. Just as a postscript, I also spent some of my growing up years in Europe and followed, European sport, soccer, and the Tour de France and some other international events, and seeing the cultural differences between those sports and their fans and our sports and our fans also was just magnetic to me. And so I've spent quite a bit of my career covering international sport.
Thank you, Bonnie. All right, Zoe, question for you. So you put a lot of work in for our Play Like a Girl event this year, and it was your idea to move forward with it virtually. You were also working with Girls Circle, a mentoring program for young girls before the pandemic. It's also been an exciting year for women in football, and you've been doing such an amazing job covering those stories in the review. How and when did you start becoming interested in women in sports, maybe more passionate about it? Yeah, tell us how that kind of came about.
Yeah, I think that I got really lucky and a lot of those opportunities just kind of fell into my lap, and I realized that there was such an overlap in how women just didn't have the same opportunities as men do in sports. And that kind of came to fruition when I was working with Girls Circle, which is a program that, like I said, is partnered with the Oberlin middle schools and high schools. And I learned that the Oberlin Middle School actually is over, I think it's like 75% male and only 25% female. And the girls that I was working with were all students of color, and they made up less than 5% of the female population at the middle schools. And that was kind of like a real shock because I grew up in New York and I'd never really, I think I was a little bit naive to those issues. And so when these girls were like, oh, like I really want to learn how to play volleyball, I was like, oh, well, let me talk to my coach and let me see if you guys can come and practice with our team. And they had a they had a wonderful time practicing with us. And, I like went into the school the next week and they were talking about how they've never had an opportunity like that. And I was like, well, I want to be able to do this for so many other people out there. And so Play Like a Girl, that was way before I even knew what Play Like a Girl was and what Oberlin was doing with Play Like a Girl. And then fast forward a couple months later and we put on Play Like a Girl and we had so many kids come and like their smiles were just from ear to ear, they loved it. And so when I started writing for the review and I was writing all these articles, I was like, football should really be a part of Play Like a Girl this year. Like if there's any time to get involved in a sport that's male dominated, it's going to be in 2020. And we're going to make change happen now for these girls. And so I think actually everyone who decided to come to Play Like a Girl was most excited to learn football. And that was really great to be able to give them this opportunity, especially with sports being canceled this year. I think a lot of Oberlin athletes were talking about how that would affect our mental health, and these young girls who aren't having these opportunities or having these opportunities taken away from them because of the pandemic should still be able to experience some sort of virtual interaction with athletics. And if I knew that if we were able to offer some sort of opportunity for them, that there would be at least maybe not as many girls as we have in person come to Play Like a Girl, but at least 5 girls learning how to play football is a step in the right direction. And so I think Girls Circle was really the thing that led me to want to become interested in helping women getting involved in sports. But, I've had a lot of other things kind of just like fall into my lap that has made me realize that this is something I want to write about. This is something I want to talk about for a long time.
Thanks, Zoe. I can tell, like, just you're talking about it, how passionate you are about it. For those of you that don't know, Play Like a Girl is our annual celebration of National Girls and Women in Sports Day. And we usually run a free clinic for the community, for girls in the community. And we offer all sports, and it's kind of just like a come and try a new sport. So usually we have like over 100 attendees, but this year we did it virtually. So Zoe kind of took the lead on that. And it was really cool. We all learned football, Natalie too. So we had a good time. Zoe, just as a follow-up, do you have a favorite article you've written this year?
I really liked writing about Sarah Fuller. I thought that she did a great job handling the backlash on social media that she got. For people who don't know, Sarah Fuller was the first woman to kick off a game in the Power 5 conference for football. And she stepped up to kick off at halftime or kick off for the second half because the Vanderbilt football team had a whole bunch of COVID cases, and she was the goalie for the women's soccer team. So they thought that she would be the best fit. And I just really like the way that she handled herself and the way that she was able to respond to a lot of criticism that she got. And so writing that article was really inspiring because not only did she break the glass ceiling for women who want to be involved in football in college, but she was able to do it with such class. And I really appreciated that and the way that she just responded to people who thought that she couldn't do it.
All right, this question's for Lila and Michaela. So how did your Oberlin education or other life and professional experiences prepare you to advocate for just social justice issues, gender and racial equality while working at a major sports organization?
I can kick it off. So I guess so my what a lot of my department does is sort of player education. And when you sign a contract to a major league, minor league team, you're suddenly required to follow all of these different policies. And some of them are things like the drug policy, but then some of them are things like diversity and inclusion, social media, the domestic violence policy, things that you might kind of call more like social policies. And so my group makes sure that players are aware of these things and kind of aware of like the league's stance. And so because of that, I do sometimes get to do some kinds of diversity and inclusion work, or kind of something along those lines. And I think something, at Oberlin felt almost like second nature or sort of like a requirement to be in the school was having some sort of language around a lot of these kind of hot topic, just kind of hard to talk about issues of, gender, sexual orientation, and race. And so kind of heading into the workforce, I didn't really realize that it would be such an asset to kind of have practiced and really know a lot behind sort of the history of just different systemic issues. And, as we try to update our league policies and just kind of also educate our players and our fans on these issues, I found it's really useful, honestly, to have my Oberlin education. And I call this sort of part of my informal education, the things I learned a lot from just the conversations with my classmates and my teammates. But to be able to, give everyone a quick refresher on the difference between gender, sex, and sexual orientation, and make sure that, we're kind of talking about things with an inclusive intersectional lens, and also be in a position oftentimes to kind of to bridge that gap and not just say a bunch of buzzwords, but take the time and be able to have some of the patience to kind of explain it for people who just haven't had that background, which is a lot of people in the sports industry, especially from different generations. And so I found that it's sort of like a lot of my Oberlin education informally has just been really useful in sort of helping the league and the way we kind of talk about these things.
Yeah, I totally agree with Lila. I think for me, my Oberlin education definitely equipped me with so many valuable tools. I grew up in a pretty small conservative town, so like a lot of these issues regarding social justice, gender, and race, they weren't always at the forefront of discussions that we had. So being a student at a place like Oberlin, where these things really matter to the professors, to the students, to the curriculum, it was really invigorating and inspiring. And I felt like in my classes, on the field, and social settings, I really learned how to facilitate and engage in conversations that were really hard and that I wasn't used to having, but also super meaningful and important. And that to me has been such a valuable tool in my professional career and just in life overall. Where not every person comes from a place like Oberlin or has that same mindset. So yeah, I'm super grateful for the lessons and skills that I learned at Oberlin, because I truly think that they help me in every conversation I have.
I really like the term informal education. I like that. But it's true. It's true. All these things we're not learning in the classroom, but we're learning with our teams or on campus. All right, Bonnie, next question is for you. Gender hiring practices generally continue to lag behind racial hiring practices. According to a 2020 Institute for Diversity and Ethics in Sports study, opportunities for women and people of color among head coaching positions have hardly improved over the span of a decade. It's also become increasingly difficult to keep women in coaching. Can you speak on this a little bit?
Wow, this is really, whoever figures out how to crack this will be a transformative person in society. I mean, it's true, the needle has not moved very far, or it seems to move forward and then move backward again, and it across sport, team sport, individual sport, less traditional sports and traditional sports. And I've looked at it, you know, in chunks sort of over my career in different sports. And unfortunately, it boils down to two really simple and difficult things to change. And one is that in all sports, those in charge, those in power tend to rely on known quantities. And we've seen it, I mean, honestly, with the professional leagues, unless there were literal rules in place, like the Rooney Rule in football, we still wouldn't be seeing diverse pools of candidates, let alone hires. People have to be sometimes, like at bayonet point, forced to consider different types of people. So naturally, women in traditional team sports have lagged behind. What's a little more baffling is why women in individual sports often, you know, choose male coaches. And the explanation for that, oftentimes these women start very young as girls. Often their fathers are their coaches. That's what they're accustomed to. Or a brother, or, you know, someone who is sort of in their family circle. So they're accustomed to it. Sometimes they stick with that, you know, most of their lives. And, you know, you can't legislate against that. Obviously, you can't force individual athletes to hire more diverse candidates. And then the X factor is that women hit a certain age, they start families, they have more of the responsibility generally for child rearing. And we've seen this during COVID, you know, that precipitous fallout of women from the workforce, because if somebody was going to stay home, it was going to be the woman. I thought this would change more in my lifetime. It hasn't. But we've seen, you know, I'm sure a lot of people on this call understand how demanding a coaching job is, whether it's at Division III level or the professional level. There's travel, there's long hours, there's a lot of delicate personnel issues often. Most of them tend to be quite, you know, hard on themselves in terms of how teams perform and feel very responsible. And a lot of times that doesn't mesh well with family life. So those, unfortunately, are the explanations. I do feel that in the last few years, we have seen a paradigm shift. We're seeing more and more women assistants and in across sport. And while it may seem glacial, I do think, you know, that's the traditional career ladder. And I feel that once women get more established in more numbers in assistant coaching positions, and players become more accustomed to it, and front offices become more accustomed to it, that's actually what's going to move things forward.
Yeah, and I think you're totally right. There's so many women that haven't even had a woman coach as a mentor in their life. You know, I've been really lucky to have many. So I feel like that has really pushed me, including Natalie, which has really pushed me into my role. And then on a personal level, I've seen 5 of my peers leave coaching this year, which has just been like really, I don't know, like a punch in the gut almost, just like, how can we keep these women around and these really awesome women coaches in the profession, because we need more of them. All right, so moving forward a little bit, Zoe, Lila, and Michaela, how important has it been for you to see women in leadership positions throughout your career as a student athlete?
I think it's been super important. I think that it's important to see women in leadership positions, like not only in athletics, but just in life. I'm a psych major, so women are definitely, there's a lack of representation of women in STEM. But when I came to Oberlin, I was actually really excited to have an athletics director who's a woman, and Natalie's done a great job, and to have a female coach, because throughout my club experience, I really only had male coaches. And it's always really kind of like a sense of reassurance, I guess, that other women have been able to do what they like, set their mind to something and achieve what they want to do. And when times get tough as a female in sports, as a woman in sports, it's kind of just, it's nice to see that other women have succeeded and that I can do that too.
Yeah, so to Zoe's point, I totally agree. I think it's really encouraging and motivating to see, women taking on leadership positions that were previously held only by men. It's so helpful when you can see yourself as that woman someday. I think it's been not only important but empowering, and knowing that there are women breaking barriers every single day. And yeah, like Zoe mentioned, the athletic director at Oberlin is a woman, and that was huge for me. My coach was also a woman, and I'm just thankful for really figures like that in my life that have really motivated and encouraged me to continue to do what I love to do, and inspire me to push through.
Yeah, for me, my sophomore year through the rest of my college experience, coach was Alicia Samuel, and she was the first female coach I ever had in any sport. So it took until like 19 to get there. And at the NCAA championships, they kind of have this ritual of if you win an event, the person that hands out the trophies to all of the All-Americans on the podium and gets to hand it to the person that wins the event is the coach of the athlete that wins. And when I became aware of that the first time I went, I was like, I want that for myself, and I want that for my coach. And it was really important to me that I had a coach that I wanted to hand me that. So, and Coach Samuel was that. And I remember that was really sort of the moment that took my breath away of my experience. My senior year when I won was just, we together had put in so much work, and the whole time I really was thinking about, I'm obviously doing this for myself, but I'm doing it for my team, and I'm also doing it because this is this fantastic female mentor I've had. There's so few of people like her, especially in this sport. And I want her to have that moment too of getting to be like, I'm the coach that trained this athlete. And that was honestly probably the most special part of the whole thing for me, was that moment.
I hope you've told her that, Lila.
Oh yes, very tearfully.
Good. Coaches need to hear that too. But a good story, great story. All right, it's kind of, I think, a feel-good question for everyone. So we all watched Kamala Harris shatter the glass ceiling this year. She became the first Black woman, and the first person of Indian descent to be sworn into high office on the 100th anniversary of women winning the right to vote. How did this make you feel? What did this mean to you? Kind of what was going through your head during this moment? And anyone can jump in for this one.
I'll start because as the senior member of this panel, You know, I've seen a lot of women run for office, run for the highest office, run, you know, as vice presidential candidates, and a certain fatalism had set in, I guess. And because the election itself was so tense and muddled and drawn out, and I really had not focused on it, which I know sounds ridiculous, but maybe I wasn't letting myself hope. But I wept. The night that she gave her acceptance speech, I was absolutely swamped with emotion. And mainly, I think, my husband has 3 grown kids, and I have 3 step-grandchildren, one of them who is biracial, and one of the lights of our life. And I did go there thinking, she's 4, not even. She is going to grow up assuming that this is possible for her. And I think that hit me like a tsunami. So it kind of blindsided me how strongly I felt. And I think it's almost indescribable, almost inexpressible what it means to me, and what I know it will mean to a lot of women around me, young, old, etc. Whether or not you agree with her politics or her approach, it's way overdue. And it amongst all of this chaos of the last year and a half, it is the one really shining beacon for me.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think she really represents so much more than just a vice president. She is a beacon of hope for so many young girls out there that really need, especially young Black girls out there who desperately need representation in the workforce. You know, I think when I look at like the nitty gritty things politically, there are some things I don't necessarily agree with, but she is representing that we're moving in the right direction, and that all the hard work that women have done in the past has led up to this moment, and there's hope that we can achieve more.
Yeah, and I think, you know, she also exemplifies just how great our possibilities are, you know, coming from a deputy district attorney position and then rising through the ranks over the years to become now a vice president of the United States. I think that's just incredible and speaks to how, you know, like our opportunities are really endless. And I think just watching her being sworn in gives us, and especially women of color, yeah, hope for a brighter future. And yeah, just hope.
Yeah, just kind of co-op knocking, retweeting everything that's been said. I think kind of like a piece I'll add to add a little sportsy twist to it is I think Kamala Harris's win, and to me that really reflected something that happened in the baseball world this year, which was Kim Ng, who became the first female general manager of the Miami Marlins. And Kim used to work in the league office, and she used to work on my floor back when we worked in a building. And I would see her every day, and she was highly, highly respected within the organization, very high up in the ranks. But once she became the GM and really shattered that glass ceiling, she was on the news everywhere. There's a million articles. And one of the things people kept saying was, everyone's known for years that a woman is qualified for this role, and specifically Kim Ng is qualified for this role, but she had been passed over so many times. And I think that's really true with, you know, the presidency, vice presidency, other high forms of office. Like, there have been women that have been qualified for years and years. And it's just really taken finally that validation of one person winning. And it's kind of crazy because, you know, Kim Ng is no different like a year ago in many ways than, you know, she's always been excellent, and same for Kamala Harris and for a lot of women. And it's really just taken that one push to break through, to really open it up for everyone else. And I'm just really excited for it to become more common.
Yeah, like Bonnie said, the beacon of hope. I think that's a good term we can use too. Good comment from Dave Shipley in the chat. If everyone read that, Sunday's SEC championship game between Georgia and South Carolina in the women's tournament was the first time in the Power Five that head coaches of teams in the finals were Black women. UGA's Joni Taylor and USC's Dawn Staley. So really cool. Dawn Staley said some really cool stuff and really inspirational. So thanks for adding that, Dave. Okay, Bonnie, Title IX is nearly 50 years old. How has the passage of Title IX changed and influenced your professional trajectory?
Wow.
You get all the heavy questions.
No, so I saw that question in our sort of preparation, and it gave me pause, because when you've lived with a piece of legislation like that your whole life, you don't really think about, how it affected you. And I have to say, we were getting a lot of mixed messages in the 70s and 80s. We saw the Equal Rights Amendment defeated, for example. So on the one hand, equal opportunity in sports, but not in society, at least not in a formalized, recognized way. I think for me, as an athlete, and I've written about this and happy to send this essay out to the group. I wrote an essay on the 40th anniversary of Title IX, saying that it's not like a switch flipped and everything changed and everything was rosy. It took a long time for reality to catch up to concept. There was no infrastructure. That we were talking about coaching before. Not only were there very few women coaches, there were very few men who wanted to coach women's sports. It was seen as second tier. The budgets and allocations did not catch up for many years. And just the greater infrastructure of leagues and competition, everything. I would say honestly that I didn't see the fruits of this as a sports writer until the 90s. And the team that really coalesced it for me was the 1999 women's soccer team that won the World Cup, which was truly a transformative team. The Mia Hamm, Julie Foudy, Michelle Akers, Brianna Scurry team. And as I was covering their march to the title, I found myself feeling jealous. And that was an interesting emotion. So I kind of drilled into it. And I realized that as I had gotten to know these women, it wasn't just that they were great athletes, which I never had the capacity to be. It was the life skills that they had learned by their 20s of being able to compete for their positions, compete against other teams, negotiate their working conditions. All of those skills they learned because of sports at a high level. It took me until my 40s at least to learn how to compete in the workplace in a professional way and negotiate and function and navigate in a male-dominated world. And it hit me that that's what it was, and that I had not had the opportunity to do that. So I know that sounds negative in a sense, but whenever I talk about youth sport and the pros and cons of it, that is my main point, is that we in the workplace, no matter what our profession is, often as women, we're stereotyped if we're competitive, if we're hard driving, if we're smart, if we go out and ask for what we want, we get labeled in a certain way, and we take it personally. And oftentimes we're justified in taking that personally. Whereas in sport, generally speaking, not always, but it's about merit. It's about merit and how you work as a team player and how you interact with your coach. And so that Title IX has reinforced for me, I guess, the value of sport as something that not only not only gives you health and wellness, not only gives you satisfaction and achievement, but also is it one of the best teachers of what you need, no matter what you go on to do later on.
Wow. Yeah, I know. Wow. I just want to listen to Bonnie talk. It's just so great. You're totally right. Wow. All right. So let's do a little quick two-parter for everyone. Just maybe favorite moment working in sports to date and a challenge that you've faced working in the sports industry.
So I can start. I think a lot of my job is kind of like an odd one in sports. And one of the things I got to do was go to a fundraiser for an organization called Futures Without Violence. That they're like a national violence prevention agency, do a lot of work with healthy relationship education. And so I attended a fundraiser of theirs on behalf of MLB. And one of the speakers was Chanel Miller, who's the author of Know My Name. And the other speaker was Christine Blasey Ford. So these two women who have really just had these pretty awful experiences at the hands of men, and speaking about those experiences in a way that is just incredibly impactful and powerful for other women. And I got to meet those speakers and just kind of tell them like what they had meant to me, and also learn from, you know, the things they spoke about. And that was just really awesome. Not super related to sports, but something I got to do because of MLB. I think a challenge for me is, you know, I spoke a bit about how I think it's important to meet people where they're at, and you know, make sure we're not, or just, yeah, like that if you're going to change someone's behavior or you know, leave them willing to change, you kind of have to meet them in a certain way. And I think that's also the hardest thing for me, is like politely explaining to people when they're doing something that is deeply offensive to me, to the point where it could even be harassment, and having to just kind of explain, you don't understand the way this is being filtered through my lens and my experiences of being a young woman in the sports industry, and having to calmly explain that so that, you know, I don't fall into those tropes of or stereotypes of hysteria or anything like that. Can be really maddening, but also is a fun challenge. So I think those are my answers to that.
I guess I'm not really sure if this counts, but I think one of my favorite moments in athletics so far has been when I found volleyball in high school. Before that, I was a competitive figure skater for over a decade, and that is a really isolating sport, mostly because the people who you're competing against are girls that are your age. And so doing that I started when I was 4, that was kind of the environment that I grew up in, and that was the sports world that I knew. And so finding volleyball was really, I mean, great for me as a person, because I learned teamwork, I learned communication, and I learned what it felt like to be empowered by teammates, what it felt like to be, to have like a family want you to do well in a sport that you're playing. And so that was probably one of my, I guess, my highest of highs in the working in sports. And the biggest challenge, I guess, is that there are challenges, you know, the list goes on and on for what women have had to overcome, and there's still a list A through Z of what we still need to do. And I think if a woman wants to get involved in the sports industry, they shouldn't have to go into it knowing that they need to advocate for themselves. They should just be able to do it. And so I think that's the biggest challenge of all. I wrote an article a couple weeks ago about Oberlin did this event with the WNBA. We held a panel, and Essence Carson, who plays in the WNBA, said that their community has had to fight tooth and nail for everything that the league has now. And they have had to work so hard to get things that the NBA has just been handed. And, that really resonated with me. I don't think it's fair that we have to work so much harder to get to where we want to be when it's just handed to other athletes. And so, yeah, I think the biggest challenge of it all is that there are so many challenges.
How did I not know you were a competitive figure skater? Wow. That's not the only thing I got out of that, but.
It feels like a lifetime ago. But yeah, I did it for a really long time, and it was super isolating. Every girl that was essentially my age was someone who I was competing against, was someone who I wanted to do better than. And then I found volleyball, and I was like, oh, well, now I have 5 other people on the court with me who I actually need to do well in order to do well myself. And that was like my mindset like completely changed after that.
Yeah, Zoe, I totally relate to that. I mentioned that I first started playing tennis from a young age. I think I was 5 when I started. So yeah, it was just a very individual sport. And then I started playing lacrosse in middle school, and it was awesome to be on this field like with tons of other girls, and that camaraderie is just unlike anything else. And I think that's what kept me playing that sport. But yeah, so I guess I would totally agree with that. And also just, when you actually go to the stadium and you get out of, your office, you get out of your workplace and you go to the stadium, and you're in that environment that led me to pursue a career in sports from the beginning. Even though I work in baseball specifically, that feeling of camaraderie, competition, and just pure joy that brings people together while watching their favorite team. It happens in all sports, and it's truly something that just never gets old for me. So I think that's definitely the highlight for me. And then a challenge that I face working in the sports industry it's honestly finding other women to make friends with, and network with. I am pretty much the only woman in my department other than one of our HR supervisors. And I really love working with my coworkers, and I think we work really well together, but it definitely is difficult sometimes to make connections with other women, since most of my day is spent inside my specific department. But yeah, I'm really hoping to see that change in the future.
So that question for me, fortunately, when I think about the coolest thing I've gotten to do or my favorite moment, my mind is flooded with so many moments that it's impossible. We would need hours. But something I just wrote down as y'all were talking is that the great competitive moments I've seen all were in a communal setting, in giant stadiums with tens of thousands of people. And at the Olympics, millions and millions are watching. And that feeling of seeing something unexpected happen, or seeing someone extraordinary achieve a goal, it's not the same without fans. We've really found that out in the last year. And with all due respect to the leagues that have tried with cardboard cutouts and Zoom fans and all the rest of it, I've come to realize over the last year that those moments that I really can pick out in my career were all about experiencing this with 50, 100,000 or 10 million people, and then having to distill it as a writer and try to make it come across. What was that like to see? What was that like to feel? So I will be overjoyed to join, even though if I'm not covering games per se much anymore, which I don't think I will be. I'm featuring or doing much more feature and longer term work, but just going to a game is going to be a remembered pleasure. And I can't wait. I just cannot wait. On the challenge side, it's what we've all spoken about. And you always assume that things are going to get better as you get older in society. And so then they don't always. Sometimes they backtrack. And so I did expect more progress. I expected more progress, certainly in the area of hiring and opportunity than I've seen. But then I look at you guys, I look at Lila and Michaela especially. I was a baseball fanatic at Oberlin. I spent all my spare time, inventing analytics games, and we played a game called Baseball Scrabble, where you got extra points if you used a word on the Scrabble board that was a baseball word. And I could never have imagined in my wildest dreams being able to work in baseball. That was just not on the table at all. So when I look at it that way, there has been progress, and it doesn't do any good really to get lost in the frustration of it. It's, and even for myself, just educating myself about, there's still a lot of sports out there where the very first baby steps are being taken. And to educate myself about women who are breaking barriers and making headway and supporting them. And with my sisters in sports writing, like someday I hope you will be, Zoe, supporting their work, pushing it out there on social media, reaching out and mentoring younger sports writers. That's a whole lot better than sitting around being pissed off that things aren't better than or they should be.
Thank you, Bonnie. All right, I think we're gonna go a little long here, but we have to open it up for some questions. If anyone has any, we'd love to hear from you.
I'll go ahead and go. What's next? Lila, Michaela, what's next for you two?
Yeah, that's the question. I think there are still a lot of things left to do and things I'd like to do at MLB, and some room for growth. I think I'm always trying to think about, learning is big on my brain right now, and there's definitely ways I'm learning at work, but I'm finding after college, I need to be more intentional about making sure I'm learning new things. And so I think definitely some more education is hopefully in my future. And we'll kind of see how that shapes up in the next year or so.
Yeah, I think there's, hopefully a lot of room to grow in MLB. I'm really enjoying where I'm at now, and just really grateful to have the opportunity that I do. So yeah, just trying to take it all in and continue to do my best.
Zoe, do you have any idea what you want to do after college yet?
Oh God. I think if I learned anything last year, it was that I shouldn't plan ahead. But I'm not really sure. I really like the things that I'm involved in at Oberlin, and I don't really know how that's going to translate in my post-grad life. But if I can continue to write and create a narrative for people who inspire me and create a narrative for my peers and other athletes at Oberlin who I think are doing great things, then that's something that I hope I can continue to do.
I am determined to keep learning also, keep myself interested and keep trying things that are new to me. It's manifesting right now in, I decided to take horseback riding lessons after not being on a horse for 20 years. And I told the teacher to start me from scratch. I rode some as a kid, but I don't think I ever really got good instruction. So I'm not going to be entering the Devon Horse Show or anything, but it is really, really satisfying to sort of learn proper posture and carriage and how to control and communicate with this giant animal. And it makes me feel like I'm 10 years old again. So those are the things I think that I like the yoga concept, beginner's mind, and I'm just trying to take a beginner's mind to as many things as I can.
Love the growth mindset there.
I've got a question. So I've been a huge fan of baseball and the Yankees specifically, pretty much my whole life. So to Lila and Michaela, first of all, thank you for doing the work that you do. And second of all, I think it's pretty obvious, at least to me, that there are some, pretty institutional issues in MLB as it relates to domestic abuse and gender equality more generally. So is there anything that just, diehard fans can do to either get involved or to kind of voice, our concerns or displeasure?
Yeah, Alex, that's a really great question. And also, Alex, very cool to speak to you. Coach Harris has told me a million stories about you and your triple jumping career, so a bit of a legend. But yeah, I've been thinking a lot, obviously whenever anything happens in the media related to domestic violence, sexual misconduct, sexual harassment, my kind of department and different people around me are working in those issues. And I think it is really important, honestly, that fans are vocal about how they feel about players returning to the game. I think that actually does have a really big impact, and teams are starting to listen to that public perception. I think we've seen that a lot in this past year. And so, there's often articles that are written that myself and my boss are like, this, it stinks that, no one's ever talking about the fact that like 2,000 young men are being educated every single year on these issues by us. They're only talking about the handful of people that are committing these awful crimes. But also, I want people to keep highlighting those things, because that's the only way that we're going to continue to get better. So as frustrating as it is for me as someone who's working on these things, I think it's incredibly important, the role of the sports writer, the role of public perception, and voicing that and saying, I'm not comfortable wearing this guy's jersey, and I'm not comfortable repping my team with this person on it. So yeah, thanks for bringing that up.
I'll just add quickly to Lila's point. Yeah, I totally agree with that. I think just holding players, the league, accountable to their actions, their words, because at the end of the day, the fans matter and they will listen to the fans. So I think just, being strong in your values and really holding the league and players accountable, I think will make a huge difference.
Well, barring any other burning questions, I've been sitting here trying to think about how to wrap this up, because for those of you that know me knows that I geek out on this women leadership and the importance of the visibility and conversation. And, I think it's also critical for those men on this Zoom call to be our advocates and to be our champions in the spaces and in the rooms that we're not able to be in. And for those of you that are on this call, thank you for doing that. And, I see Craig's face and Blake's face, very visibly, and Mark Walsh, and, everybody, Chris Smith, everybody on this call has done something to empower a female voice. And so thank you for that. Sports are academic in nature, and our playing fields offer lessons in discipline, resilience, camaraderie. They offer these critical lessons in how to win and how to lose. And as Bonnie said, and, the world is competitive. And for girls and women, it is critical that we have the opportunities to compete in this competitive world so that we can rise to leadership positions. Zoe, Michaela, Lila, Bonnie, Erica, you guys are shining examples of how this platform can celebrate strength and grit of women, and grace of women as well. So thank you for sharing your experiences and stories with us today. We're going to keep kicking the glass, because of you, for you, and with you. And to everyone on the call, our Oberlin community, I think that alone we have power, but together when we show up, we are a force. And this community can do so much good, but we have to make the choice to show up together and to have these communal victories, as Bonnie has said. Bonnie, I'm gonna ride that phrase like no other. So thank you for saying that this morning. But this discussion is a communal victory today. And so I hope that we can all feel that we won today. You know, this was a, you know, without games, actual games on our schedules, like these have become a game day for us. And this is a big victory that we have a community that is willing to show up and have these discussions. I am unaware of any other institution that is showing up consistently on these mornings to talk about race, to talk about gender, to talk about politics, and how sports is woven into these things, and how it can be a platform to reach people and connect and empower. And you know, I'm just so grateful to be here and have the opportunity to do this, and not just think about X's and O's, because those are important. But this is the impact of sport. And you know, we have another opportunity coming up to have another communal victory. So circle April 21st on your calendars as another game day. We are going to have a Oberlin College Athletics Huddle Up Happy Hour. This is going to be, we're going to invite all of our athletics alum to come together in one giant Zoom room. We're going to huddle up. We're going to talk about, you know, what's been happening in the athletics department, where we are and where we're going to go. And we all want you to show up and go all in with us on that evening. So circle that date, April 21st. You will get messages in your emails and on social media and things like that. But again, thank you. You guys have made my morning. Yeah, Erica, thank you for hosting. Ladies, who run the world? As Beyonce says, who run the world? Girls. So thank you, Beyonce. Thank you, Bonnie, Michaela, Zoe, Lila. Thank you.